Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and Podcast Tuesday means it's a great day. And one reason it's a great day is because we have the world's greatest listeners. Remember, you guys are the reason we are a global top 10% podcast. You can reach us as usual at bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, hit subscribe, or like, whatever that is whatever it is that makes my life better will make your life better. And doing that will be a thing that will make things grand. Remember, tell a friend to listen and you will get me a free episode. And somewhere buried in the show notes, if you go searching, you will find a link where you can buy me a coffee. Today, we're going to put together a couple little stories to lead to a lesson. That's kind of a standard operating procedure here. So I'll just start off that I remember being a little kid. And I remember my dad, I'm going to call it, I remember him doing woodworking. And I say that, I guess I'll say, I remember him more than just being a doctor and more than just being a father. He did some other things. He worked in the yard a lot. He did a lot of gardening and stuff like that. And he did some woodworking. He made things out of wood. And in the basement of our house, he had some tools and a workbench and some built-in cabinets that he made. In fact, there was this running family joke as the cabinets were in 3 columns. There was like a left cabinet and a left cabinet, middle cabinet, right cabinet. And then there were 3 rows. There was the bottom shelf, the middle shelf, and the top shelf. And different things were supposed to end up in different sections. You know, this is a section for paint, and this is for, hammers, and this is for, I don't know, whatever else, clamps, and, different things were supposed to be in different places. But you know how most things go. In the end, almost everything ended up in what we referred to as middle cupboard, middle shelf. And to this day, if you ask a family, if you're in a family situation with our family and you ask where something is, maybe you are in somebody's kitchen and you're trying to help out and you need the blender, or you need the crock pot or something like that, and you say, well, where is this thing? It would not be uncommon for you to be met with the response of, it's in middle cupboard, middle shelf, which really translates to, I'm not sure where it is. Just go there, look around, and you'll probably find it. So there were some jokes like that we made about my father's woodworking stuff, and that seems like almost a pejorative description of what he did, or maybe even a disparaging remark, kind of implying that his workshop was disorganized, or that he wasn't serious about the work that he did, or that he was amateurish inside things he did outside of his practice. But that's not at all the case. It is a simple recognition that when I was growing up, my father worked, and he worked a lot. And this is not a complaint either. We were well taken care of. My mom was at home and took care of us and did a great job at that. And my dad worked not because he was chasing some sort of rise up the company ladder. He was treating patients. He was, when he started his practice, he was essentially the only pediatrician in our town. He was always on call, like always on call. We had a special ringer built into our house that when the phone rang, the ringer, there was a speaker outside. So in case he was in the garden or something like that on a Saturday afternoon, the phone rang, we could hear that. He could not miss a call. Until a second pediatrician came to join him, he was on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 7 straight years. And that's a lot of time being on call. If we went on vacation, I had to hire somebody to come in and be on call for him. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. And, there were patients coming into his office for routine care, something like I think he averaged something like 40 patients a day for, think about that. An 8-hour day, and his days were a lot longer than 8 hours, but an 8-hour day gives you 5 patients an hour, or 12 minutes per patient, which is not enough time to do. It's not. So he did not have 8-hour days. They were 8, 10, 11-hour days, just in the office. Every time he went into the office, every day that he did that. And he had patients he had to see in the hospital who needed to be attended outside of the scheduled patients in the office. And then he had office hours on Saturday and just in the morning, which meant he got home like at 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And then Sunday mornings after church, we had to go to the office, into the lab, and he would read throat cultures. So back in the day, you would culture the throat with a swab and wipe it onto the plate of agar and then let it grow for a day or two. I don't know how long it was. And he and my mom would go in there and read the throat cultures and see who had strep and who didn't. And then they'd have to make the phone calls and get them on antibiotics, whatever it is. I mean, this guy was working, right? And had no free time, none. And that's not to say he didn't love what he did. And it's not to, and I don't think we were at want for anything, but he didn't coach the baseball team. That's just what he was doing. He was doing doctoring stuff. But the other things he did, like the gardening and the working around the house and doing the woodworking, meant that those things took a back seat. Right. But even with all of that stuff, he did build some stuff in his workshop. So like I said, he built those cabinets that were in the workshop. He built our kitchen table, which is a table that I think is still in use in my nephew's house. He built some cabinets for toy storage in our playroom, and these cabinets are still in use in my house today. They've been upgraded a little bit by me, but that's that happens when things get a little bit older. He built 3 matching, I guess I'll call them small office cabinets, one for me and one for each of my brothers. And mine is still in use in my house, and I know one of them has been refurbished by him and is in use in his house. And the third one, I'm not exactly sure where it is, but I'm sure someone will tell me when they hear the episode here. And he built these things 40 or 50 years ago, and almost all of them, as far as I can tell, are still standing. I've done a little rework and maintenance on some of the cabinets in, like I said, the ones in my house, and they are still going strong. So think about that when you are purchasing your latest cabinet from IKEA, that 40 or 50 years from now, where will that cabinet be? And my recollection is that a decent amount of the wood that he used came from a very old barn to which he and a friend had some access to this barn. Let's just call it that. And I think it had fallen down and it was in pieces or in disarray. And he and his friend had permission to take what they wanted before the barn got hauled away. And wherever barns go, they go to the great farm in the sky, right? They jokingly called their wood supply the Midnight Lumber Supply Company because they would run out there under cover of darkness and take the pieces they needed. Anyway, this resulted in a large stock of wood that he used for these things. And he used that for the kitchen table and the bench that matched it, and also some wood for a desk that he made, the desk that he used to write his first book. And, did I mention he wrote a book during that time as well? 1975, I think, is when it came out. Now, this desk was really, desk is kind of a grand term, but he used it to work on. It was basically a simple table with a paper and pencil drawer. Sometimes we call it a lap drawer because it sits right above your lap. And it had a pull-out shelf for a typewriter. So you could take the typewriter and put it on top of the pull-out shelf. And one didn't need to put the typewriter on the workspace on the tabletop. So, and the legs were simple spindles. The spindle legs, they might have actually been chair rails or stair rails that had been repurposed for, you take a railing for a staircase and you flip it upside down and it makes a pretty good table leg. And the apron is the piece that goes between the legs and holds the legs together, and the top sits on the legs and the apron. And it's that's the apron. So the apron was attached to the legs with some very simple hardware on the inside, and all was good. It's a very simple table, and it did what it was supposed to do. But I think a little over a year after he built this table, the top of it started to cup. That's what I'm trying to say. The top of it started to cup, and it cupped very badly. It warped in a manner I've never seen wood do what this wood did. This was magic wood from this magic old barn. It sounds like a C.S. Lewis story or something like that. But the tabletop was probably, from my recollection, was like 5 feet by 3 feet, something like that. And the overall cup in the short direction was probably in the neighborhood of 1.5 to 2 inches. I mean, this thing was like a skateboard half pipe. It was an amazing amount of warp that this thing achieved. But there was a sad thing, all right, because he didn't deserve that. He did what he should have done with the wood, but for some reason it was not as dry as they thought it was, or the humidity changed, or he built it in dry situations and then it got wet, and who knows. Anyway, it warped a lot, and that happened. So about a decade ago, I got possession of this table and decided to fix it up, to straighten it out, to reflatten the top. And the way to fix such a thing as this is to cut the top into strips so that so each strip has just a little bit of cupping in it. And then what you do is you plane these strips so that they're all flat on the top and the sides are square. And then you glue it back together. And of course, when you do that, when you cut it apart, you lose a little bit of you lose some wood, because the saw blade that you cut it apart with takes a kerf of the wood out, and the total amount of kerfage that left the tabletop was less than an inch or so. So I was able to reaffix it to the base. Once I got done, I restained it and refinished it and got it put back together for him. And hopefully the wood had dried out by then. I think it's still in good shape, but we'll have to see. Now, what was interesting to me is that if you've ever done furniture repair or restoration of this kind of thing, I always find it a very humbling experience. Right? If you want a little bit more discussion of some restoration, you can go to episode 244 and listen to my experiences restoring an Edison Ambarola phonograph from about 100 years ago. Basically, you are taking someone else's work, and time has taken its toll on that work, and you are healing it. And it might be that, in a certain sense, that may be kind of like doctoring. If somebody gets old and you fix their rotator cuff, or you help them with a bunion or something like that. It's probably a lot like that. But I have to say, I don't really know, but I do know it was a humbling experience for me. And the reason it was humbling is you get to glimpse into what the other person was doing. And from that, you try to understand what he was thinking or what he was experiencing at the time. What were his concerns? What were his limitations? What were the aspirations? How was he getting along in doing this project that he sought? And as I took the top off of this warped table, I saw better what my father, who was busy doing 100 other things at the time, what he had created. The boards, in general, at least for the frame, were cut straight. The sides were parallel. The holes for the screws had been placed where they need to be. The hardware was aligned, and everything was fastened properly. This was certainly not an amateur at his first rodeo. Okay, this was not. You can see. I'm sure there are lots of videos online about people mocking people who have built things poorly because they were rookies. I've never thought it was good to mock somebody who's just starting out, because all of us started out at one time. And, even when he started, even Jack Nicklaus wasn't breaking par. But what astonished me when I did take this table apart and start to do the refurbishment of it is that the screws that were used to hold the leg hardware and hold the top clips, there's some little pieces of hardware that hold the top to the frame and allow it to move back and forth. The screws for this were an assortment of at least 4 different types of screws, different lengths or different diameters or different head shapes. They're made of different materials. You name it. These were different screws, and it struck me as an odd thing. But then the more I thought about it, I came to better understand what the maker here was doing. This was a man who had likely worked a zillion hours in the past week, had finally gotten the parts cut and sanded and prepped, and he was ready to put this table together so that he could stop using the card table on his book writing space. And it's 10:30 on a Saturday night, and the wife and the kids are in bed, and he's thinking, I just got to get this done. And I imagine him digging through, a bucket of extra screws and other hardware. We all have one of those buckets in the garage or the basement somewhere. And he's digging through, this will work or this one won't work. And okay, I need 5. I have 5. I need 7 more. This one won't work. This one. Oh, here's one. I can use this one. That makes 6. All right. I only need 6 more. Oh, here's one. I got 7. All right. I can see him digging through this thing, trying to find screws that will work to do the job they needed to do. And I saw somebody living a full human life and building a table, complete with his flaws and stresses and constraints. And this respecting of what he had done gave a special life to the work that he had done. And I don't recall when I reassembled the table after I put the top back together, if I replaced the hardware with matching screws all around or not. I don't recall that. If I did, I did it to fulfill a constraint that he had to work around. And if I didn't, I did it out of respect for the original. But I worked as I sanded and I reaffixed the top and I stained it and painted and did all that stuff. I worked very hard to retain what I'm going to call the essence of the work that he had done. And I did that to maintain the story that was in that table. And I want you to think now and compare that understanding of that desk and that table to the throwaway stuff that you get from our friends over there at IKEA. Now, over the last several weeks, I've been putting stepping stones and bed edging stones around my house. And I may have mentioned this in last couple episodes, but I currently have about 20 stones to go. And you maybe think, oh, you should just be done with that. 20 stones, that can't take very long. Well, no, it takes quite a while. These are flat natural stones from a local quarry, and they sit in the grass. All right. And they sit so that the space between the stones is filled with grass. Okay. So I lay the stones out there so they make good steps. And then I remove the sod that they are sitting on. And then I dig down about 2 inches into the dirt, and I set the stones so they will sit flush with the earth and relatively level. And then I put the stone in there, and I pack some dirt around it because I've obviously made it a little bit bigger than the stone. And then I move on to the next one. And it takes me, 10 or 15 minutes per stone to do these things. And it's, here I'm working beneath my feet. That's a painful thing to do as you get older. And I go at about 10 feet an hour. So it takes me, going all the way around the house takes some time. I guess if I were really diligent, I could have done this whole project in about a week, but I didn't really want to get up every morning and work sunrise to sunset because I have other things I want to do. So while I do this work, while I'm working here in the yard, dealing with heavy rocks and a shovel and a tamper and like I said, the things are beneath my feet. There are workmen who are building on the empty lot across the street. They are building a new house. And the house, as I look currently across the street at that house, it is currently a basement concrete shell. The only thing up is there's a hole there and there's a basement shell in there. So basically a large hole was dug with a digger. Concrete footings were laid in the bottom of the hole. Concrete forms were brought in and assembled. Now, these forms, if you've never seen them, they are large large metal. Well, they're large forms. Okay, they're the big flat pieces of metal, 2 of them side by side, and they are attached with some big screws between the 2 of them. Basically, the 2 flat plates is what they are, and they have some things on them to allow them to not bend. Right, and they are about 4 inches apart. These 2 plates. And these things are probably 10 feet tall and maybe 2 to 4 feet wide. And they take these pairs of plates and they put them vertically around the outside where the basement walls are going to be. And then they hook them together with these special connector bolts that they bang in with a little hammer. And they build the walls. They build a form for concrete for the walls of the basement. And after that, the concrete is poured into the form. And then after that sets up, the forms get removed, and then pipes get laid in the bottom of the below the basement in case there's some sort of drainage that needs to go around. And then there's drainage tile put around the outside of the house for a sump, and to account for water that's on the outside. And then lastly, the concrete is poured on the floor of the basement, and then on the garage floor, and then that piece. Then they can start working on the rest of the house. And so that's where we are now. We're pretty much at that stage where they're waiting to do. I guess the next thing is that they're going to bring some. They will bring some floor joists out, and they will start working on the first floor. So I'm out there working, like I said, with heavy rocks and a shovel, a tamper, and just pretty much on my knees there digging in the dirt. And I watch the workmen, and I think about what I'm doing, and I think about what they are doing. And they work really hard and spend a lot of time in order to do easier work and save time. Okay, so for example, these concrete forms, like I said, are a real adventure. They show up on a big truck. It's like a kit of forms, and they probably know because they have the plans, like which forms they need, how many of the 4-foot ones, and how many of the 2-foot ones, and how many of the 6-inch ones, and how many of the special adapter ones they need. Whatever that is, they come on a big truck, and this truck actually has a crane on it, a little mini crane, and there's a guy sits in the crane, and he lifts up a pack of these forms, 4 of them in a box or in a chunk, and lifts them up and puts them down into the hole, so the guys don't have to carry them down in there. Okay, and so the crane puts them in there, and then once he gets all of these collections of forms into the hole, the worker guys come and they spend 3 days or so putting the forms, bolting them together to match the plans. All right. And like I said, there's all sorts of different sizes. So they can do, whatever your house basement looks like, they can match that thing. So, and then, they got to put rebar in there, and they put brick ties on there because at some point there's going to be some a brick veneer on the outside. And they put there's some little metal ties that will be embedded in the concrete, and they have to go in now before they pour the concrete. Right? Those will be sticking out when they're done. And like I said, once all this just takes like a week. It takes a week just to put up the forms, to put them up and get them ready to go, and get everything set. And then comes the concrete truck. And you can't just come with concrete and wheelbarrows and spoon it in there. There's a concrete pump. Right? It's this big machine with a gigantic arm on it, a big boom arm. And I'm sure you've seen these things, and they have a huge hose on them, probably 4 to 6 inches in diameter. And you actually dump the concrete from the concrete truck into the concrete pump, and the pump pumps the liquid concrete up to the end of the boom and then down into the hose. And there are guys on the other end of that hose who steer the hose around the forms, so the concrete goes into the forms, and there's a guy with that get the air out of the concrete thing, that thing that vibrates and lets the air come out, so you don't get air trapped in the concrete. And they go around all the way around the form with this thing, and this takes like it's like 2 days to pour the concrete for the form. It doesn't go very fast, but there you go. That's what they're doing, and it's not. I mean, I'm sure this is not easy work. It's probably hot. Concrete's hot, and it's summertime here now, so that's not very comfortable. But there they go. They have the concrete trucks line up, and then when one concrete truck is empty, the next one lines up and puts more concrete into the pump truck, and there goes the concrete. And then they let it sit a day or two or a week, and then the guys show up and they start taking down the forms. They knock out the little pins. They pop the edges of the forms off of the concrete, and the extra concrete gets chipped up the forms. They get cleaned up. Right? The forms get broken down, and they get put back in their little piles and their stacks. And then the guy comes with a crane truck again, and he comes in with the crane. He lifts them up and puts them on all these little collections of forms. Picks them up, puts them on the truck. And then after about 3 days, all the forms are gone, and the basement walls remain. It's smoothish, grayish, and rock hard ish, and it's ready for the next step, which will they will bring some big saws and some big drills, and they will cut certain holes in the concrete for particulars, like the sewer line and the window wells and some additional anchors and all those little things that the forms could not do. They will do now. I'm going to say it by hand, and they will cut holes in the concrete to get it to do what they want to do. And this, like I said, this takes several weeks for the basement walls to be put up, because the forms, the use of these forms get used one time on this house, and if you're a company, you own a couple collections of forms. I can't imagine what a set of forms costs to build these houses, but they all have to be scheduled and sequenced and all that. The crane truck needs to be available, and the concrete truck needs to be available, and the concrete, the pump and the concrete need to be available, right? And all that. This is just for the basement walls, okay? And then the walls will be sprayed with some keep the water out barrier spray stuff, and then there's going to be some drainage tile that's going to be run around the outside of the house. And then they're going to take some magic epoxy cement stuff and glue some insulation to the outside of these basement walls. And then finally, they're going to put some rock toward the bottom, and then they'll put the dirt around the outside, and that will be the basement construction. And meanwhile, I'm laying one stone at a time, 15 minutes per stone, 10 feet per hour. And I asked the builder guy, I was like, okay, so you're doing all this stuff with these concrete forms and these concrete basements. You could do concrete block, you could do stone, you could do all sorts of other things. Surely this house should last like pretty much forever when you do this. And he was like, no, not really. We're looking at about 80 years. And now, granted, in 80 years, he'll be gone and I'll be gone. You may be gone. All right. But my dad's table that was warped, and that I fixed it up, and had screws that didn't quite match. That's already been around for half that time. And it's in pretty good shape. Certainly after the de-warpage that I gave it. And that's going to last a really long time if I just keep it out of the rain. And my stones in the yard, they're going to last for, I don't know, as long as the grass doesn't cover them completely, which could be, I don't know, could be decades or centuries. I mean, who knows when those stones are going to be gone. And I think about someone someday, in theory, I mean, I'll move out of this house someday, and someone could take a skid steer loader, one of those little bobcat kind of things, and they could put a scoop on the front, and they could do a lap around my house, and they could scoop up all those stones and a little bit of dirt with them, and they could dump them all in a dump truck, probably in less than 30 minutes. And I think of my dad's table, and I think of the house across the street, and about building and about craftsmanship and longevity. So all these things are going in my head while I'm putting these stones in the yard and watching the guy across the street. And then I think about the buildings I saw last summer in Europe. Some of those buildings were built in the 1500s and earlier. I saw stones in a cathedral in Strasbourg that were laid it was like 1,200 years ago. Right? And some of the buildings that were, and there are buildings that are around now in Wisconsin, where I grew up, that have been since torn down. They were built to tremendous cost and then torn down. And the word that keeps coming to my head when I'm thinking about maybe somebody ripping up my stones, or somebody taking my dad's table and throwing it in the dump, or somebody taking this house and tearing it down, there's one across the street. The word that comes to mind is respect. And when I see videos now and then of somebody knocking down an old church in some place in Europe, that some church has gotten, it's old and people want to put up a new thing, and they hire a backhoe guy to come in and start knocking it down. They tear down the building, and the building has stood for centuries. And I can't imagine how what's the guy thinking when he's doing that? This is just my job. Is that what he says? I can't imagine how he can do that if he truly understands what the people who built it put into it. Okay. I know what my father put into his table, because I've built tables. I've cut and planed and shaped and sanded wood and turned boards into a table. And I know what he put into building what he built, right? He put late nights scratching out snippets of free time, and he put in pride in knowing that he was doing the best that he could, that his name was on the table, that who he is was built into the fabric and the essence of that table. Now remember, you don't produce art to deliberately describe who you are. It is the art that you produce that reveals who you are. It reveals the essence of you. And I think it struck me this morning while I was making these notes that the image and likeness of the maker gets inscribed into the maker's creation. Just like the maker's image and likeness has been imprinted onto you. So I respect what my dad has done and what he has crafted, and I can see him in what he produced. And I know all about the work I put into the stones, aligning them and digging them and lifting them and fitting them. And I've done these things, and I put a piece of myself into them. I can see the image and likeness of me in their placements. And if someone takes a skid steer loader to my stones and scrapes them away, then the person doesn't respect the work that I put in there, is I guess what I'm thinking. And I wonder, because I'm thinking of this about the little stones I did, and I think about what the table my dad built. I wonder about this house across the street. These are good men working out here. They support their families, and they show up early and they stay late, and they're good at doing the forms. Okay, but are they getting a chance to really put pieces of themselves into their work? That's the question I'm thinking about. All right. When it becomes mechanized as it is for them, do they still maintain the ability to be craftsmen? And I see the destruction of grand old buildings of the past, and I see the cold steel, glass, and concrete industrial fabrications of today. And I think it comes down to respect. Those people built those buildings for us and for our children, and we are replacing them with structures that likely won't be around to be appreciated by our grandchildren. Why would we do such a thing? Okay. Now, we like to seek the good, right? Okay. And I keep thinking, well, where's this going, Rafe? Well, how are we going to turn this around? Because it seems kind of negative. What is the point? Where's the good? Where's the adventure of life? I think it's this. Point 0. Respect what was left to you. Real people, just like you, just like me, they left these things for you. They spend their lives leaving them for you. A piece of their life is in that table. It's in that sofa. It is in the mirror on the desk. It is in the house that they built. It's in the bicycle they built for you. The people spent their lives on these things. So these things contain an element of them. Respect your elders who created these things by taking good care of the culture they are leaving you, both the material and the immaterial things. Take good care of the culture they have left for you. Point 1. Craft things that you make with an eye for the future. Furniture was never intended to be a throwaway commodity like chewing gum. Buy quality crafted items made by men and women who left an imprint of their souls in their work. If these things are being cranked out of assembly line factories, they don't have the souls of the makers inside them. Craftsmen produce an imprint in the work they do. Point number 2, maintain those things that you have. These are gifts to your grandchildren from your grandparents. Your job is to ensure that they show up intact. Study and learn how things were done in the past so that you can pass things down into the future. Tradition is a word that centers on the idea of passing things on. Respect those before you and those after you. Treasure, carry, and transmit the past into the future. Point 3, make new things that people in 500 years will want to pay wild sums of money to acquire, things that they will travel across oceans to see, things they will take pictures in front of. Those are the things you should be seeking to make. And point 4, make things that are true, that are good, and that are beautiful, these transcendentals are the pathway back to God. In the meantime, seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.